My jungle will lure you in with paths that are deceptively apparent and secrets that will never be uncovered. Silver starlight may show you the way. Shape-shifting shadows will lead you astray. So open your eyes. I will show you a world etched deep in my mind. Only the greatest explorers of the unknown, those who are willing to lose themselves, can unravel the enigma. For the essence of the jungle lies not in being found, but in getting lost. Welcome to Thorn's Jungle. How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Thorn's Jungle. Hope everyone had a wicked holiday season. Christmas, New Year's. It was bloody hectic here. It's just, everyone's birthday seems to be in December in our family. Then we have like 2 Christmases. It was great. It was awesome. Ate a lot of food, drank a lot of booze. Saw the family. Yeah, it's great. But yeah, it's weird because everything's so hectic for like a week or two. It's like events every day, stuff to do, and then all of a sudden, bang, as soon as New Year's hits, it's like dead. So you kind of get that, like, I guess, I don't know, it's like a shock to the system. You know when you come back from holidays and you're doing something every day, seeing new things, and then you get home and the holiday's over and it's like, oh, everything's just back to normal. It's like that weird transition. But no, it's good. I can prepare for Africa now. It'll be 2 weeks today and I'll be in Africa. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to be bloody awesome. This episode is another Pant Hoot podcast. So as you may or may not know, every now and then I'll drop a Pant Hoot podcast episode, which means it's going to be about primates. And today's episode is on one of my favorite primates, if not one of my favorite animals, and that is the orangutan. They are awesome, and they're actually the only great ape I've seen in the wild, which I hope to change at some point soon. I definitely want to see gorillas, chimpanzees, and bonobos in the wild at some point, and I'll absolutely do that in the near future, hopefully. But I am definitely satisfied and proud to say I have seen a wild orangutan, and it was one of the top 5, if not top 3 animal highlights of my life. It was just a magic moment. There's no other way to describe it. It was absolutely magical. My brother and I were in Borneo, in Malaysian Borneo, which is like Sabah. We were over on the east side of the island in Sandakan, and we were doing a documentary on the bear cat, also known as the binturong, and they're the largest member of the civet family, and they do look like a bear slash cat slash otter slash a whole bunch of animals sort of crammed into one. They're really cool animals, but it was a bit ambitious of me to go to Borneo looking for one because they are just super elusive. So we didn't actually find one. We had to go to a wildlife park and make do with filming their one. But as we were out in the jungle one day, we hear this sort of crashing in the trees, and bear cats are arboreal. They live in trees a lot of the time. But hearing this crashing, I knew that this was too big to be a bear cat. And the only other thing of that size could be an orangutan. And we followed the crashing noises, and there it was, a juvenile male orangutan just hanging around, moving through the trees. It would have been maybe 7 or 8 years old, so it was just kind of, I guess, straying from the mother. We couldn't see the mother anywhere, but orangutans will stay with their mum, up to 6-8 years, and then they sort of start moving further and further away from her. So that's probably what was happening. He was kind of venturing off by himself, and I walked up to him and he sort of came down to check me out. He reached his hand out. I reached my hand out to him, and he was sort of like, yeah, not really interested, and just sort of kept on moving. And it was just an unbelievable moment. It was the last thing I expected to see. Even though Borneo is one of only 2 places you can see orangutans in the wild, it was like, you just don't expect to see that. I mean, even though you know they're potentially there in the area, we weren't looking for orangutans, so it was one of the most pleasant surprises you could ever have. And it's just a weird feeling seeing an animal that is very close to you, like in terms of evolutionary and, I mean, just anatomically, they are so similar to us. It's like coming across another person in the forest, this person that has, 15 to 20 million years of different evolution, but still so close. I mean, orangutans, they say, are about as smart as a 5 or 6 year old child. And they're just, everything about them, you look at the way they look at you, and you're looking at them the way it's looking at you, with that sense of curiosity and wonder. And they are seeing the world through very similar eyes as you're seeing the world. It's absolutely amazing. And that was the Bornean orangutan that we saw. And I think there's a few subspecies of orangutan in Borneo. There's like the black orangutan, they call it. I think that's found a bit further south in the Indonesian part, Kalimantan. I think it is, from memory, or it might be the one that we saw. But anyway, there's 2 or 3 different subspecies, but we're not going to get into the subspecies. We're going to just get into the 3 species of orangutan. So we saw the Bornean orangutan, which is Pongo pygmaeus, and over on Sumatra, they have 2 species. They have the Sumatran orangutan, which is Pongo abellii, and then you have the recently described Tapanuli orangutan, Pongo tapanuliensis. But all of them are endangered. Right, all of them are at threat from human habitation and deforestation with palm oil, and you would be aware of it. I mean, just flying over any of these Southeast Asian countries, you can just see the endless, vast palm oil plantations. It's actually mind-blowing. And that was all once orangutan habitat, and when orangutans come onto these plantations, a lot of the times they're killed because they, eat the crops, they eat what the farmers are trying to grow, especially like the rubber plantations when the orangutans get in there and drink out of the taps that are put on the side of the trees. They are unfortunately killed. Sometimes the mothers are killed and the babies are taken and then sold as pets. It's horrible, especially, that this animal is basically a person, pretty much a person. But orangutans are the largest arboreal animal in the world. The heaviest bodied animal that lives in trees. And just looking at the anatomy of an orangutan, it is built to be arboreal. It has these enormous hands. It has a huge arm span. Like a 4.5 foot orangutan can have like an 8 foot wingspan, It is insane. And if you look at their hands, they have gigantic fingers, but their thumbs are tiny. It looks very unproportionate. But there's a reason to that. Because when you have huge hands that can hook around branches, hook around tree trunks, things like that, the thumb actually gets in the way. Because you're not going to be able to wrap that thumb around like you can the other fingers. It just kind of gets in the way. So the thumb is atrophied, so the hands can just freely be used as hooks without a thumb getting in the way. And when they're like brachiating, which means swinging through the trees, which is especially common in gibbons and things like that, the thumb gets in the way if you're trying to launch yourself and grab onto branches. So they have tiny little thumbs compared to the rest of their fingers. It's actually quite bizarre to see, but it is perfectly evolved to living in trees. And Bornean orangutans are actually found way more on the forest floor than the Sumatran species of orangutan. And there's a reason to that. Large orangutans, like the big males, can weigh, over 100 kilograms. They are enormous. They're the second largest ape in the world after gorillas. And moving through trees for an animal that size can be a little difficult, right? Imagine a 100-kilo animal, crossing from tree to tree. It's pretty difficult, no matter how well adapted and evolved you are to being arboreal. So what Bornean orangutans will do, they will go to the forest floor and walk from tree to tree and then climb back up the tree. It's a lot easier. But you can't really do that in Sumatra. I mean, they do, but nowhere near as much as the Bornean orangutans. And it's because Sumatra has tigers. They have Sumatran tigers there that will absolutely predate on an orangutan. So the Sumatran orangutans are a lot more arboreal than Bornean orangutans. There are no tigers on Borneo. I think the largest sort of land predator would be, you've got clouded leopards and large reticulated pythons, but reticulated pythons can climb trees anyway, so you're not really going to avoid them. I guess like the massive 6-meter reticulated pythons will have a little bit more difficulty getting up a tree, especially fast enough to grab an orangutan, but they don't have these massive mammal ambush predators like they do in Sumatra. And orangutans are different to the other great apes because they're mainly solitary. So they spend the majority of their life just by themselves. Especially like your big sexually mature males. And at about the age of 12 to 13, the male orangutan will form these fat cheek pads. They're called phalanges. And I mean, you can spot them a mile away. They're like big plate faces. And not all of them will develop these, only the real sort of big, dominant, sexually mature ones. And it's interesting because they've actually done testosterone tests in orangutans in the males, and they found that the big male orangutans with the big phalanges, the big plate faces, when they do their long calls, so they do this call that can be heard from a great distance away, and that basically will tell other male orangutans, all right, this is my territory, I'm here, so don't come near me, and also signal to females that there's a male in the area as well. But with the males that hear these long calls from these big sexually mature males, it actually reduces their testosterone in the other males that are hearing the more mature sexually mature male doing the calls. It's almost like these long calls are like scaring the manliness out of any other male orangutans that hear those calls. It's actually pretty interesting. But that will ensure that younger male doesn't intrude on the more sexually mature male's territory. And there will be fights. When two males come in contact with each other, they can fight and they can get pretty injured doing so. But other than that, they rarely fight because they do call out and establish their territory before that happens. And also, there's not much competition for food with orangutans because they eat both fruit and sort of fresh young leaves, like new leaves that have grown. So luckily in Borneo and Sumatra, there are plenty of leaves. So if there was maybe one fruiting tree, you can get maybe a couple of orangutans seen together eating from the fruiting tree, but they won't really fight because there's plenty of fruit to go around. And also they're not going to fight over food for leaves because there's leaves everywhere. It's mainly a territorial thing where you will see fights. With gorillas and chimpanzees, they fight quite a lot to both assert their hierarchy and dominance, and also for territory. but they live in large groups, especially chimpanzees. So fighting you see a lot more of rather than the solitary orangutans. And like I said before, you'll often see the female and an infant up until the age of 8 years old. Sometimes even 10, that infant will be hanging around the mum. And then they'll slowly sort of disperse away from each other. But that makes orangutans far more threatened from extinction because they have babies so irregularly. If you got there's pros and cons to that. Okay, if you have one baby that you put a lot of care into, and you kind of don't have them until maybe every 3 or 4 years like orangutans do, they'll still have like the infant hanging around up until like 8. So what happens is if you put a lot of care, a lot of effort, a lot of time into that one baby, the success rate for the survival of that baby goes up a lot. Okay, because it's getting so much nurture, and because that mum only has one baby, she's going to protect that baby with everything she has. If you have an animal that gives birth to lots of babies, they don't put as much care into them. I mean, a lot of times as soon as they have the babies are off doing their own thing, unless it's like, a tiger, a lion, big cats, things like that. So the cons to having a lot of babies is you cannot put in as much care into each individual baby. But you've got a lot of them, so if 1, 2, 3 of them were to die, you've still got other ones that can, breed on your genetics, your genes, and survive. If you have one baby, yes, you put in a lot of care to it, you've raised it really well, but if something does happen to that one baby, that's it. That's that investment gone. So there are pros and cons to having multiple babies or one baby. Okay, and obviously the father isn't there to help out either. He will have a territory that has females in it, and that's pretty much the only time he'll see another orangutan is if he's defending his territory against another male or he's mating with a female. And, he can bug the shit out of that female. He can follow her around and mate with her, many times. But yeah, so that's I think why I love orangutans so much, is because they are so different to the other apes. And they're the only other great ape, apart from humans, that live outside of Africa. And during the Pleistocene, which was about 10,000 years ago, towards the end of the last ice age, we had orangutans on Java, there were orangutans on mainland China, in Cambodia, Vietnam. So orangutans were actually quite widely distributed on planet Earth. But during, when the Ice Age ended and the Greater Sunderlands sort of separated into their own islands, Borneo and Sumatra were once connected. That's why we have tapir and like it was connected to mainland Malaysia as well. That's why we have... So mainland Malaysia was connected to Sumatra. And Borneo, I don't believe, was connected. That was connected to somewhere else, which is why we have like Malaysian tapir on Sumatra as well as on Peninsula Malaysia. But Borneo was connected somewhere else, which I think is why the genetic divergence between the orangutans are so different, which is why they're different species. But yeah, I might have to double check that. But anyhow, originally, they were all classified as Bornean orangutans, and then they did genetic analysis on the Sumatran orangutan and found out it's a completely different species. And in fact, the Sumatran orangutan was one of, like, I think, after chimpanzees and humans, the orangutan was the third one to have this genome completely mapped, which is pretty cool. And then we get to the Tapanuli orangutan. So orangutans are found in northern Sumatra, right? The Sumatran orangutans. And then there's a lake called Lake Toba. I think it's the largest lake in Southeast Asia. And for years, I think the 1920s, there were reports of orangutans south of Lake Toba. And they knew they were there. And after looking around for a long time, eventually in the 90s, they found them. 97, an expedition found these orangutans again. Actually, we'll go back because now I've got the date. So 1939, orangutans were reported south of Lake Toba. And then they did an expedition in 97 and found a population of orangutans there. But they just thought they were Pongo abellii, the Sumatran orangutan. But then they did phylogenetic study in 2017 and analysed genetic samples from 30 or 40 wild orangutans that were part of this South Lake Toba population, and found out that they were genetically different to the ones north of Lake Toba. So they were put into their own species, which is amazing. I mean, they weren't a newly discovered species. They knew there were orangutan there, but they were a newly classified species. So they were classified as Pongo tapanuliensis, which is really cool. And they do look a bit different to the other Sumatran orangutans. They look more like Sumatran orangutans than they do Bornean orangutans, but they still have differences. For example, the Tapanuli orangutan has their canines on their maxilla, so on their upper jaw, are larger. They have more of a flatter face than the Sumatran orangutans as well. They tend to be a little bit more paler in colour. But Sumatran orangutans are generally a lighter colour than the Bornean orangutans anyway, but the Tapanuli orangutan is a little bit more pale. So there are morphological differences as well. And also the Tapanuli orangutans have really obvious moustaches, right? And like their cheek pads sort of stick out a little bit more as well. So yeah, they've got a ripper of a bloody moustache on them, more so than the other Sumatran orangutans, the abellii species. So yeah, it's pretty cool, and I hope one day I can see the Sumatran species. When I was in Sumatra in July, I was way too south to see orangutans. I was in West Sumatra, and they're only found in the north. But what's interesting as well, as soon as the Tapanuli orangutan was split into its new species, it was instantly the most endangered species of primate in the world. So how crazy is that? It was like when it was the most recently described species, it was the most endangered species of primate. It's pretty sad, you know, and like orangutans aren't really hunted for food, although some of the Dayak tribes in Borneo have or still do hunt them occasionally for food, but nowhere near as much as, for example, the bushmeat trade for chimpanzees in Africa. But orangutans are mainly being driven to extinction because of that habitat loss. And I think like most orangutans live outside of the national parks as well, which just makes it really hard. So like, you know, they can designate a big area for orangutans and not bulldoze that area, but it doesn't really, I mean, it definitely helps, but when orangutans are living outside of that national park, then it's almost just free game. And the illegal pet trade with orangutans is still pretty high. And the fact that the mother orangutan will protect the baby so much, you cannot go up to an orangutan and take the baby. There is no chance in hell. The mother would never allow that. So they have to kill the mother to take the baby. Almost every time. And you know, when primates, especially the great apes, are hand-reared by a human being, most of the time the ape will grow up with behavioral problems because the mother teaches the babies lessons in socializing, play, things like that. When they don't get that, they don't know how to behave, and they can become aggressive. If you have an ape, same goes with chimpanzees, but even more so. I don't believe anybody has ever been killed by an orangutan, both in the wild or in captivity, but they've certainly been injured, especially in captivity, because orangutans can bite. They are endlessly strong. So, yeah, it's not good having any ape as a pet, because they are stronger than human beings. Once they reach teenagers, they don't want to be in captivity anymore. They want to do their own thing. And it doesn't end well. And you have a animal that is highly intelligent. It's one of the most intelligent animals in the world. It's very difficult to establish intelligence when it comes to animals, because most of the tests that humans do for intelligence in animals are based on human intelligence. Okay, so they give them a thing where there's holes that are different shapes and put these shapes in the holes. That's a human intelligence thing. It's very it's a bit stupid. And Frans de Waal, ethnologist and primatologist, he wrote a book called "Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are?" or something like that. And it's a really good book because it does show that, to test an animal's intelligence under our guidelines and our rules is it's very asinine, and it doesn't really show much. I mean, you couldn't put a human being out in the jungle and go, okay, know which leaves are edible and which ones aren't. Know how to make the right tool to get termites out of this hole, or to collect this honey without being stung. You couldn't get a 6-year-old child and go, okay, how would you get the honey from this beehive using a stick and without getting stung? They wouldn't. That doesn't mean that an orangutan is smarter than a 6-year-old child. I mean, although human tests show that they are pretty similar. But yeah, even a human adult you couldn't chuck out in the wild and go, show me a leaf that you can eat that won't make you sick and is digestible. And 99% of humans won't be able to do that. So that is putting a human test under ape conditions. Okay? And it's the same thing. It goes vice versa. Telling this ape, put this amount of red things in this container and this. It's like that. They don't do that in the wild. Like, why would you give a orangutan that has hundreds of thousands, millions of years of evolution for stuff in the wild, have them, in captivity for a couple generations and think that they will know that? It's completely arbitrary. It doesn't make any sense when talking about intelligence in animals. Because they're not humans. They are close, but they're not humans. And I'm not saying orangutans are smarter than humans. I'm just saying they are smarter than humans with things that they need to be smart at, and that is survival in very harsh conditions that not many humans can do. So determining intelligence in animals is very, very difficult without anthropomorphizing it. But in saying that, orangutans, out of all the apes, are master tool users. They use tools probably better than any of the other apes. And we know chimpanzees and bonobos are great at using tools, but orangutans are kind of next level. And there's a little saying that if you gave a captive gorilla, a screwdriver, it would probably scratch itself with it. If you gave a captive chimpanzee a screwdriver, it'll probably try to kill you with it. If you gave a captive orangutan a screwdriver, it would unscrew the screws in the cage and escape. Because they are crafty. And I've heard a lot of stories regarding captive orangutans and how good they are at escaping, because they'll watch what their keepers do. They'll watch and they'll learn routine, and then go, okay, at this time I'll do this, or I'll put this there, and that will mean I can escape from here. And our zoo here, Perth Zoo, for example, the orangutans have escaped a bunch of times. There's a giant moat around the enclosure, but after years of watching and learning, they will escape. I mean, you can put a human in a cage like that and they wouldn't know how to escape. I mean, they don't have the physical capabilities that orangutans have with climbing and things like that. But still, orangutans are very, very clever and very, very crafty apes. And they are absolutely amazing apes, and that's why I love them so much. And in saying that, orangutan, what do you think orangutan means? Some of you will get it, some of you won't. But I know a lot of you will be under the impression that orangutan has something to do with their orange fur, right? When it actually doesn't. Orangutan comes from the Malay words orang, meaning person, man, and hutan, meaning forest. And that is kind of interchangeable throughout Indonesia as well, because it's Bahasa. They're very, it's basically the same language. So orang, man, hutan, forest. Forest man, forest person. And I think the Dutch kind of bastardized it a little bit and changed it, where they didn't include the hutan, the H in hutan. And orang, basically stayed the same. But I've got a little pet peeve when it comes to orangutans. I hear so many people say orangutan, tang at the end, the G in the end. I mean, you wouldn't be incorrect in saying that, because when the orangutan was first described, they did include that G on the end, orangutan, because it was mispronounced when they were describing the orangutan. But still, we know better now. So it's orangutan rather than orangutan. Every time I hear people say, I've heard people that actually work with orangutans saying it orangutan. And I'm like, oh, come on. That's not how you say it, man. So yeah, that's a little pet peeve of mine. But hey, you can say it if you want to. What else about orangutans are pretty bloody cool? There's probably some. Oh yeah, here's one. So when the Dutch first came to, believe it was Sumatra, the locals were talking about orangutans to them, and they also called people that live in the forest orangutan because it was just forest person, but they also called orangutans forest people. But when in Java and places like that, they didn't. Or not Java, sorry, Sumatra, they didn't. But in Borneo, they did. So it was kind of like, are you talking about the person or the ape? But in, I think, Sumatra, they didn't. It was specifically used for the ape, forest person. But when they were telling the Dutch about it, they told the Dutch that the orangutans talked, used language. Not a very good language, but they could speak. Whether or not that's like folklore sort of blended in or what, or they were like mistaking some of the orangutans' calls for talking, which it is a form of communication, but it's certainly not a language. Who knows? But it was pretty interesting. And orangutans make a whole variety of calls. They do like a kissing, like sound, and then they do their long calls. I can't replicate it, but yeah, there are certainly different vocalizations with orangutans, but certainly not a spoken language. So, I don't know. I think the locals were just trolling the Dutch. All right. Well, I think that concludes this episode. 35 minutes of talking non-stop about orangutans. Yeah, I hope you learned something. It's a Pant Hoot podcast. Pant Hoot, for anyone that hasn't listened to any of the other Pant Hoot podcast episodes, a Pant Hoot is a noise that chimpanzees make when they do their, like, the typical chimpanzee noise, like, and they do that, when they're excited and things like that. So that's what a Pant Hoot is. Jane Goodall can do a ripper one. Me, not so much. But so I named my primate episodes Pant Hoot podcast. So when you see that, you know it's about a primate. Yeah, all right. So everybody, again, if you haven't subscribed on any of the platforms that you're using, subscribe, give us a rating. And if you haven't grabbed a pouch or a t-shirt, head over to biothorn.com.au and get yourself a pouch. They're still on sale. They are still on sale. $10 off. So, yeah, grab yourself one. I'm going to be wearing mine in Africa. You better bloody believe it. And I'll see you next week on another episode of Thorn's Jungle. Have a good week, everyone.